Good morning, everybody. Thanks very much for joining this webinar this morning, sponsored by SYSTRA and Bus Centre of Excellence. I'm Cathryn Jones. I'm the Director of Fares and Ticketing for SYSTRA. This is a really interesting discussion for me because a lot of the work that we do with our clients is looking at what is the right charge for travel. So I'm really interested to hear from the presenters today, and I'm expecting quite a lively conversation at the end of it. So we've got a nice spread of presenters for you today. We're starting off with Brian Wong, who is a partner at Burges Salmon. And then on to Emma Pym, who is one of my colleagues at SYSTRA, and she's a principal research consultant. Then we'll be joined by Phil Wright, who's a public transport programme manager for the West of England Combined Authority. And then we've a really interesting presentation from Jerome Serodio, who is from the National Coordination of Collectives for Free Public Transport in France. And finally, we'll be joined by Beat Mueller, senior consultant from UITP, who'll be presenting again on a different viewpoint on the cost of travel. So thank you all to our presenters. If I can now hand over to Brian to share his thoughts on the bus bill for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Cathryn. If we could just flick to the title slide of my section. Because the bus services bill is imminent in the UK, I thought it would be good just to set the context for this debate by just describing the UK regulatory context as it is, because those are the regulations that authorities are going to have to use going forward. So I guess my opening comment as an avid bus follower over my career is that we currently have in the UK a really remarkable level of political consensus on the importance of the bus. And it wasn't always this way. You don't have to go back very far to find a time where the bus was really an afterthought in public transport terms. And you would be really hard pressed to get the attention of any politician, unless you're talking about a car or a train. But if we say from around kind of 1999 onwards, kind of policy support has rallied around the bus as a kind of real socio-economic workhorse when it comes to local transport. And the policy case has only really strengthened in recent years as social mobility and accessibility, well-being and net zero concerns have also come to the fore. And so you can fast forward to around kind of 2021 and the first national bus strategy of England, introduced no less by a card-carrying, bus-loving Prime Minister at the time. And we have this kind of cross-parliamentary consensus right up to today on the importance of the bus. And we haven't kind of seen this for kind of decades. The quote that's pulled out from the National Bus Strategy there just kind of sums up all the kind of boxes that the bus is now ticking. And certainly if you read the language there, it starts to kind of feel almost kind of human rightsy, which is the kind of theme of this session today. So why are we not necessarily seeing this kind of love of the bus translate to outputs? Because with exceptions and doing our best to account for the effects of COVID and the likes, the broad trend outside of London in the UK has been kind of decreasing services and fewer passengers. For some, the kind of finger is pointed at the deregulated nature of the market outside of London, but it's probably much more complicated than that, as we'll see. We flick to the next slide, please. So outside of London, it's somewhat simplistic to say that the bus market is some kind of deregulated Wild West. In fact, there are a large number of really significant regulatory tools by which the state can and does deliver policy interventions here. There are some pure regulatory tools. So there are some special exemptions that are given to support operation of non-profit bus services. There are statutory enhanced partnerships and franchises that have been available. They have been underused historically. We know that Manchester is the first and so far only one to franchise outside of London. But I suppose less well known is that, prior to the government declaring that they would make bus funding contingent on it in 2020, only one authority in about 3 years had actually put in place an enhanced partnership. So just making tools available doesn't necessarily mean that they get used. There are also financial subsidy tools. So grants exist to support bus services. Broadly, the kind of general funding for buses has been falling, but increasingly we've been seeing kind of devolved funding pots for local authorities, as well as specific funding pots directed to particular areas of bus services. So whether it's electric buses or whatever, which allows for more kind of targeted, more local interventions by policymakers, some of which will be explored later today. At the national level, the last government did introduce a nationally supported fare cap scheme in 2023, which has been a net positive for the industry, I have to say. That has been retained by the current government, albeit at £3 level instead of £2. Within this group, there are also some financial tools which directly support societal aims. So where services cannot be operated commercially, local authorities can and do contract those directly. It's fair to say that that has probably been one of the most impacted areas of decline, not just because of local funding pressures, but because these services tend to be relied on most by those with poor transport options. And furthermore, where services do run, the other main national level of intervention is the mandatory concession scheme, whereby the state effectively pays for free travel for eligible elderly and disabled people within specified times. All other kind of state-funded concessions are ultimately discretionary to local authorities, which can create a bit of a kind of postcode lottery, depending on where you live. I've mentioned publicly owned operators there, but only because there's often talk about the ban on kind of municipal bus companies, but they do actually exist in London, in England, not in London, as well as Scotland, Wales, and kind of virtually the entirety of Northern Ireland. So they're not novel as such. And finally, a really important tool that's always been available to local authorities is highways and traffic management. In the railway world, we talk a lot about the relationship between track and train. And for buses, it's really quite clear that they depend on roads. And furthermore, given that road space is shared with others, it depends on traffic. So priority is often key to be able to deliver better bus services or bus services at all. That shared road space can and has very often been a political minefield, but you can't really get away from the fact that congestion is a particular barrier to better bus services, because reliability is at the root of how people value their buses, what they might be prepared to pay for them. And ultimately, if I'm sitting in a bus that's stuck in traffic, I don't tend to be thinking about who specified the bus service or owns the bus company or what color the bus is. I just literally wanted to move. And that is a really practical thing that can be done to help the bus. In summary, therefore, the current position is that there are quite a lot of regulatory tools that have been available to the state. Other than these kind of national schemes, the tools have been used at local level at really kind of variable extents, often due to perceived lack of funding, resources, or political will at the local level. If we flick to the next slide, please. This is what the Bus Services Bill is going to bring in. It is entering its closing stages next month, and will probably be law shortly afterwards. The key message from this slide is that the local authority toolbox is going to get even bigger. It's going to be almost kind of overflowing and overwhelming, in fact. The government's key message throughout the debates has been that this bill is about further devolving power towards and empowering local authorities. So you've got expanding franchise powers to all local transport authorities without the need for ministerial oversight. You've got making franchising a bit more streamlined, a bit more flexible. You've got further enhancing the partnership model, and in particular, requiring parties to scope what are called socially necessary local services, and putting in some additional safeguards against their withdrawal. You've got more local authority powers over grants, bylaws, inspectors, and you've got the lifting of the ban on creating new municipal bus companies. One of the few nationally mandated requirements will be the requirement for zero emission buses, currently from 2030 onwards. Some of this is no doubt very, very radical, and it offers up many more options to be considered for local transport authorities. It does lend itself to a potentially very varied patchwork of local approaches across England, depending on kind of local funding, resources, and policy priorities. And that picture starts to look a little less human rightsy than the kind of national bus strategy might suggest, because inherently rights are rather more universal in nature than this might suggest. If we flick to the next slide, please. I often find it instructive, because I'm a lawyer, to look at proposed amendments to bills that didn't quite make the cut. Here, these rejected amendments speak to many of the decisions that are ultimately going to be left to local transport authorities. Real mixture here. How are they going to fund and skill up to use these tools? How are they going to define and protect socially necessary local services in practice? What minimum service levels should they apply to their area? How are rural authorities going to use these tools? What discretionary concessions should be prioritised and funded above what is nationally mandated, particularly for young people, I have to say? And how do they actually deliver better bus services? And how far will local authorities go politically to promote actively bus services and increase bus usage? These are big questions for local authorities, but they're going to have to address them. From a regulatory perspective, they're about to be given pretty much every option and every tool you can think of. So regulation is not going to be an excuse anymore. But a toolbox does not make a house. It is necessary, but it is not sufficient. The question is how, with limited money, capacity, time, skills, resources, and political capital, you can best use these tools. And hopefully the insight from my fellow speakers today can guide some of those big policy decisions. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Brian. That was a really good introduction to the discussion we're going to have. And I think that the point I really take out of that is the fact that it's potentially still going to be a very patchy network of differing offers to customers. Next, I'd like to introduce Emma Pym, Principal Research Consultant at SYSTRA, who's going to talk to us about some of the research that has been undertaken looking at low and free fares. Thanks very much, Emma. Oh, sorry, just before I start, I did forget to say, Juliana has put it in the chat. I did forget to remind everybody, please, any questions you want raised with the panel, please put them in the Q&A, not the chat. We'll only be monitoring the Q&A. The chat is for you as participants to chat to each other, share information, and generally comment to each other on things. Q&A is the only place we'll be picking questions up from. Thanks very much, Emma.
Thank you, Catherine, and thank you, Brian, for the fantastic introduction to this really important topic. So I'm Emma Pym. I'm a principal researcher in SYSTRA's social and market research team. And as a bit of background on the next slide, SYSTRA are an engineering and consulting group who specialise in mobility solutions. The social and market research team that I sit in have over 40 years of experience in delivering high quality, customised research and evaluation throughout the policy lifecycle. Today, I'm going to be talking you through some of the research and evaluation that we have delivered to support bus fares policies, with a focus on how those policies could influence transport behaviour change and wider socioeconomic outcomes. So just on the next slide, and thinking first about fares policy design, When designing policy, it is really common to take lessons from elsewhere, both to understand how similar policies have been delivered in the past and to consider what effect a policy may have on the people that it's targeted to support, thus enabling human-centered policy design. And SYSTRA's social and market research team have delivered several evidence reviews focused on how public transport fares can influence behaviour change and other socioeconomic outcomes to help a range of clients develop schemes that successfully deliver their objectives. These evidence reviews have looked across a number of existing case study fare schemes, which are shown on the slide here, and they range from completely free public transport, as in the Scottish Government's free fare for young people on buses, to delivery of capped fares, such as the £2 national bus fare cap in England and the €9 multimodal ticket in Germany. On the next slide, I've included some findings from our review of these existing case studies. We have found that fare simplification and affordability are really important in growing bus patronage, and reduced capped and concessionary fares clearly all have a part to play in that ambition. Evidence does suggest that concessionary and discounted schemes are likely to be financially challenging to deliver, but partnership working can make way for different opportunities, such as sharing resources for application processes and queries from passengers, and also around promotion of the schemes. By contrast, evidence does show that blanket fare reductions can be financially difficult to deliver, especially with limited funding available at a local level. Looking at the types of journeys being encouraged by fares initiatives, the case study evidence does suggest that fare policy could encourage additional leisure travel rather than particularly encouraging modal shift for commuting. And evidence shows that there's also some unintended consequences from fare schemes. For example, German evidence shows that reduced fares could encourage additional trips by public transport without reducing car travel in parallel. And there is some anecdotal evidence that there are chances of antisocial behaviour increasing where free travel is introduced. Finally, and most importantly for this discussion, evidence suggests that fare schemes can contribute to wider policy objectives, particularly around socioeconomic outcomes. So just moving to the next slide. Recognition of socioeconomic outcomes and impacts are embedded into UK policy development. The HM Treasury Green Book on Policy, Programme and Project Appraisal outlines how each new policy, programme and project should be considered from an inequalities perspective to understand how different types of people might benefit or disbenefit from different schemes. And wellbeing and productivity are also considered too. We've delivered a number of monitoring and evaluation projects for public transport fare schemes to understand to what extent they achieve their objectives, and also wider policy impacts around wellbeing, productivity and equalities. And I'm going to talk through some of these now. So first up, we've monitored the outcomes of a number of flagship schemes for Transport for Wales. The first of these, which is shown on the slide here, is a flat fare trial across the South Wales cities of Cardiff and Newport. So in December 2021, each city offered a different fare incentive to encourage bus use around the festive period, get people into the city centres for shopping and leisure activities. In Cardiff, that was a single bus ticket for £1, and in Newport, that was completely free bus travel within the city boundary. Our research approach was the same in each city, so we undertook an on-street face-to-face survey with fare-paying adults following each trial, just to unpick any influence of the trial on main mode of transport used within the city region, frequency of bus travel, and any prevailing barriers to bus use. And we had about 800 people complete the survey, evenly split between Cardiff and Newport. And we found that just under half of survey respondents who usually travel by bus in each city region said that bus travel was a necessity for them due to lack of access to other modes of transport. Other motivations for bus travel were the financial cost of that travel relative to other types of transport that were available, and services being close to where participants wanted to travel to and from. So what impact did a flat fare trial have in both of the city areas? So of those who had an awareness of the trials in their city, most said that their frequency of bus travel had remained unchanged. So that was about 75% in Cardiff and 60% in Newport. But there was a fifth in Cardiff and a third in Newport who said that they travelled by bus more. The fare trials were seen to be kind of influential in that decision to travel by bus more for the majority. So in Cardiff, 93% said that they only did more trips by bus because of the trial. And in Newport, 99% said that they did more trips by bus because of the trial. When looking at modal shift in particular, we did see that around half of the respondents to the survey reported by travelling by bus more and replacing journeys that they had made by another type of transport. Unfortunately, most of those trips were made by foot, although a very small proportion did say that they had replaced a journey by car, either as a passenger or a driver. So just moving to the next slide. Also for Transport for Wales, SYSTRA have been commissioned to undertake research to understand views towards a new tap-on, tap-off bus fares and ticketing pilot in North Wales. And this pilot is across lots of different operators in North Wales. I think when this research ran, it was across 25. And they ranged from kind of large big five operator to very small operators who sort of just pootled up and down on one route twice a day to take people from the top of the mountain down to the bottom. The pilot started in 2023 and is still ongoing. And what it does is it offers contactless bank card or mobile phone payment for bus travel, which might seem quite commonplace in a lot of areas, but in this rural location, it wasn't available. And the trial also offers a simplified fare structure. So people are automatically charged the best value single or return fare, or a fare that's capped at the day ticket value, which is at the time of this research was £6. We delivered 3 phases of research on the pilot, including multiple different types of research. So we did surveys, workshops, focus groups, accompanied journeys where we got on the bus with people and kind of saw how the tap on tap off worked in practice, and also some depth interviews with operators and bus drivers. We did find that simplified bus fares were recognised as a key benefit of the pilot by research participants. And we saw that there was a month-on-month increase in tap-on, tap-off transactions, showing higher levels of engagement in the kind of big operated routes compared to the routes operated by smaller operators. Research participants identified a number of reasons why they might not have engaged in the pilot, which could act as a barrier to participation. And they included not all people having access to or feeling comfortable using a contactless bank card, and people not necessarily being aware of the cost of their travel in advance, which could be a barrier for those who need to closely watch their finances. And despite the scheme aiming to encourage transport behaviour change and increase bus patronage, at the time of this research, which was quite soon after it had been kind of bedded in and implemented, so we hadn't seen any long-term effect, there was evidence that bus use frequency had remained largely unchanged, but of course that may have changed now. And Cathryn might know a bit more about that, as her team also worked on this project with me. And it also doesn't mean that the scheme didn't have a benefit for users. We did find that the users said that the payment method was a lot easier than what was previously available to them. And frequent bus users also noted the positive impact of the scheme on their travel costs, particularly due to the capped element of the pilot. So finally, moving on to the next slide. In England now, not Wales, SYSTRA and Frontier Economics have delivered a process impact and value for money evaluation on the national £2 bus fare cap for the Department for Transport. SYSTRA oversaw the delivery of a public opinion tracking survey. We did 5 waves in total, focus groups with members of the public, and also stakeholder engagement, talking to the operators themselves. If you don't know this already, the £2 national bus fare cap ran between January 2023 and December 2024, and it was a voluntary scheme for all bus operators in England. And if they opted in, operators could implement a £2 cap on single adult fares to save passengers money and encourage greater bus usage. And during our evaluation of the first 10 months, we found that the scheme contributed approximately to a 5% increase in bus patronage out of a total of 13% outside of London compared to the previous year. Bus operator data did show that bus travel costs decreased for some journeys, and in fact, around 40% of those participating in the latest survey reported that they had saved money as a result of the £2 fare cap. And around 30% of participants in that latest survey said that the cap had a positive impact on the amount of income they had for other expenses, and also on their disposable income. When we talked around these figures with participants in focus groups, they highlighted how they'd been able to kind of use the money they'd saved on bus travel to purchase fresh and healthy food that they hadn't been able to purchase before, and to spend more money on social activities and leisure trips. There was evidence of modal shift to the bus, most commonly away from cars, and cost was seen as a driving factor in deciding to make the switch. But we did see that there were kind of differing levels of impact around different passengers. So the main beneficiaries were existing bus users, young people and urban populations, and barriers to bus travel did still remain, both in terms of reliability and frequency. So I've just got one more slide. So what does that all mean for the bus services bill socially necessary services definition? So as Brian mentioned, the socially necessary services definition is currently looking at bus services that are crucial for communities to access essential amenities, but would not be profitable for bus operators to run on their own. Just on to the next slide. So SYSTRA's research does suggest that all bus services have the potential to be socially necessary for some passengers, whether that be due to lack of access to other modes of travel or opening up different opportunities or releasing income. And it could also be argued that any modal shift to bus travel is socially necessary in order to decarbonise the transport network and provide benefits for everyone. But clearly there is a lack of evidence and data around who uses public transport and why. And thinking back to the rejected amendments outlined by Brian, local authorities will need lots of support to get that data in order to make decisions that are bedded in what people need in their local area.
Right, Emma, I'm going to have to
That's
stop you, I'm afraid. You have run over a little bit. I did want you to be able to show that last slide because it linked into what Brian said, but you didn't quite manage your 10 minutes. Right, moving on swiftly, can I introduce Phil Wright, who's a public transport programme manager with the West of England Combined Authority. Thanks, Phil.
Hi, good morning all. I'm going to do a presentation today which will focus primarily on our Kids Go Free summer campaign, which is fairly hot off the press, just completed. But I guess I just wanted to just make sure I put it into the context of some of the other initiatives that we've been delivering over the last 2 to 3 years in the region, and to why we've got to this stage, why we think this is the right campaign. So I'm just going to give a quick background on the initiation, the operation, and at very high level initial thoughts on the results. Next slide, please. So just some of the other initiatives, which some of them I'm sure you have been aware of in your region, but I guess I just wanted to, this helps to give that context. So we've retained the £1 child fare cap in our region, and we wanted to make sure that that was built on by the offer that we ran this summer. We've got a care leavers initiative which is focused on initially on the 18 to 21-year-olds, but it's now focused on the up to 25-year-olds as well. And you can see already 228,000 trips since we launched this in October 23. So that is having an impact on very vulnerable people within society, and how we can give them initiatives and opportunities to improve their life. Next slide, please. And then we've also focused on the older generation, the Diamond Travel Pass. These are fairly new initiatives that we've only just launched, so we've got a 3% growth already, which is amazing. But we will continue to monitor that to look at what the impact of it has been to increase the diamond card use outside of you can do it in peak now, so that they'll be able to use those initiatives during peak. And we've got a youth guarantee which is linked to the Youth Trailblazer scheme, and we've worked with our unitary authority partners to look at how we can ensure that we give people, young people, an opportunity to get into the employment in work. Next slide, please. So, what is this offer? So, primarily, we've got a new mayor. Helen Godwin was elected as the mayor of the West of England in May. She was very focused on how we could give children and young people the opportunity to get out and try the bus. Ideally, we would look at, as some of the other presenters have talked about, what's the impact on giving that free bus travel to young people right across right across the year. Financially, that is a difficult place for us as an authority to have the budget to be able to afford that. So we've looked at what we can do in the short term and in the medium term. So we've looked at the summer holiday period particularly, and as our mayor sets out there, it's focused on a difficult time of year, but also opportunities for people during the summer holidays. Next slide, please. So giving freedom to young people over the holidays, I think that's really important, especially those who are teenagers and want to be able to get out and about a bit more. We want to really, one of the key focuses for this is that it gives us an opportunity to establish those travel habits, get people using the bus who maybe wouldn't have used the bus previously, especially young people, but also, I guess, getting families out and about, exploring the region, getting out on the bus, getting down to, we're fortunate where we are. We can get down to places like the beach in Weston-super-Mare in our region. So getting people out and about without having to think about having to be using the car all the time. And I think that behaviour change element is a key part for us. Next slide, please. So what did we have to do to get through this? So we have operators who we've worked with over many years for various different fares offers. So we've tried to align our processes with something that is already in place to make it as easy as possible for each other. Obviously, most of the operators will know that what an under 16-year-old will look like, which made our life a lot easier. We didn't have to develop a whole back office system based on cards and ticketing machine changes, etc. So that made our life a lot easier, especially with the short time scale we had. I should stress we had 7 weeks from the mayor giving us the nod that she wanted to do this initiative to launch. We've got a cross boundary. Although West of England Combined Authority doesn't include our North Somerset colleagues, even though the bus travel to work area does include North Somerset. So we made sure that we work with them collaboratively. And we had to, one of the, I guess, technical things we had to do was to agree reimbursement rates with the operators based on expected uptake in child travel across all operators. We're looking at what the data looks like and what that impact was on costs and how we can potentially improve that for future initiatives. But I think that was a really important thing to consider. One of the ways we measured it was the operators set up an option on their ticketing machines where they could just click a button, which would basically be able to say how many people we had traveling on it. So we were getting fairly good live data as we were going. And that was a key element of it, was to make sure that we got that data on a regular basis. Next slide, please. So getting onto the operation of it, we focused on the summer holidays. And I appreciate summer holidays vary by school, region by region, city by city, town by town. So we had to come up with a fixed date. So we went for the 19th of July as seeing a fairly standard when most schools started to break up around that point. We ran it through to the 5th of September, which took us into, there's always that blurring it time when children start to go back to school, but on different, there's inset days and there's things like that happening. So we came up with a time frame which would be clear to everybody so they'd understand when this would work. We did it on all of our registered services, including our demand responsive transport system. And we worked with the operators to make sure that they went and briefed their drivers. We wanted to make sure that there was no confusion over this. There's always a risk that the message doesn't get passed down and drivers suddenly wonder why there's loads of teenagers trying to get on the bus and get on for free. But I've actually seen it working and seen it in action, and the drivers have been fantastic. Like I say, they do know what an under 16-year-old looks like. So they were very good at kind of just, wave them on the bus. And I think it worked really well. Next slide, please. So what did we do to try and promote this? I think this was a really important element of what we did. We obviously did a big press launch one month before the offer. Photo shoot on the right there. You can see one at the beach and one at a railway station showing our mayor and lots of children. And how do we get them engaged with the initiative? It's actually gone off the scale. I didn't fully appreciate how big this would grow. The story got picked up nationally and internationally, and it's been really good to see that it really has been something that has been supported locally and has triggered interest all over the world, definitely in the country. It's been a really collaborative approach to this. The operators have really bought into it. Our politicians have really bought into it. We've had a whole engagement process through this. It's been really well received. I can't stress, and I'm not just saying that. I've worked in local government long enough to know there are times when that isn't necessarily always the case, but this has worked fantastically. Next slide, please. We just did some stuff. We made sure we did targeted marketing. We did it through our all of our networks, our unitary authority colleagues, through our Visit West, to our newsletters, public, and getting out through attractions. We obviously used our bus operator channels, and obviously we did it through our social influencers connections as well. And the next slide, please. What we did was we targeted it 10 days before the offer. We did a lot of radio work on this. We really did target the parents of under 16s, 11 to 15-year-olds particularly, because they know they are more likely to travel independently. But there's loads of evidence to show that the parents were getting out with the under 11s as well. So it did work really well. Next slide, please. Just want to be able to show one of the clips. I'm not sure whether these clips will work, but if we can, they're very quick ones. So I think it's worth. One on the left is for the slightly younger teenagers, and the one on the right is for the older teenagers. I'm not sure they'll play, Emma. If they do work, that'd be fantastic. Oh, there's no volume, is there? Well, no volume, but you get the flavour for it. You've got to give the flavour for what the initiative looks like, and it was really well marketed in a short space of time. And this got some real engagement on places like TikTok. So it really worked for us. Next slide, please. So results. So what we've done is we've done some qualitative research. We've been looking at ticket machine data, and I should stress at the moment we are still analysing the full set of data. Next slide, please. We worked with all the operators. Every single operator in the region signed up to this. So we are getting data from all of the operators in our region, which is again, say it was a fantastic effort from everybody. Next slide, please. We've basically got some feedback already. We got some feedback about how it's worked for people. We've got a huge number of people who have increased their bus trips they've taken this summer. 50% have reported that Kids Go Free scheme has reported them to go and visit places that they would never otherwise taken. We've got a particular issue which I'm sure is replicated across the country, where we have parts of our region where children generally don't explore; they stay within their area. The best example I have in Bristol is where people who grew up in some of the more working class deprived estates have never visited the Clifton Suspension Bridge, and we've had feedback that has happened. People have been out seeing these things which they've never had opportunities to go and see before. Next slide, please. I've got some testimonials here. I don't want to go through each of these one by one, and we'll share the slides to show what the testimonials are. But you can see here some of the stories. It's not just about getting the children out there. It's about the pressure that's taken off parents by giving them opportunities to be able to get out and try something different, and take their children or grandchildren out on the bus. And I think that's the real benefit of this. One of the things we are looking at, and we haven't got the data for yet, is looking at what the impact's been on diamond card holders, and whether there's what the evidence base is for older people taking grandchildren out on the bus as well. Next slide, please. Getting close to the end now, Cathryn, so nearly there. So a third of our participants, like I say, use the bus very rarely. 50% of the bus users have said that they've used the car less this summer as a result of the scheme, which I think is a really important thing. Next slide, please. And one of the things I think is really important, going back to the start, it's about getting people to use the bus more. So, we've got anecdotal evidence starting to emerge already that people are likely to now get on the bus because they've realised it's quite good. We've actually aligned this with our new electric buses we've launched recently, which are aircon. They've got flashing lights on them.
They've got please get to the end. I don't want to cut your slides off.
Yeah, no worries. Nearly done. I think I'm just onto the data at the end now, the initial data. Sorry, Emma, if you can skim down. Nice photo there. 900,000 plus people have used so best part of 1 million people have used this, which is fantastic. Amazing patronage. And just one more slide, I think. So yeah, just to show that growth. So that's the growth. So we've seen 32% growth in patronage across all operators, well, the 5 main commercial operators, but across all operators as well. And this is compared to 2024 figures. I'll end it there. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much. I'm sure people enjoy your presentation. Can I swiftly move on to Jerome, please? Jerome Serodio is he works for the National Coordination of Collectives for Free Public Transport in France. Thank you very much, Jerome.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. First of all, pardon my French accent. So my name is Jerome Serodio, and I coordinate the National Collective for Free Public Transport in France. Next slide, please. In the next 10 minutes, I'll briefly explain who we are, what free public transport looks like in France, and we will speak about the case of Dunkirk, which is one of the most ambitious examples of fare-free mobility in France. Next slide, please. So we are a national coalition of local groups, non-governmental organizations, unions, political parties, and citizens, all committed to making mobility accessible to everyone. Our objectives are to first engage in public debate, second, build strong public support to influence decision makers, and third, make free and quality public transport a new universal right. We defend public services, we oppose the commodification of mobility, and we promote a model that is socially just, environmentally sustainable, and inclusive. As we often say, free public transport transforms the city into a common good, promoting social cohesion, access to culture, work, and citizenship. Next slide, please. So free public transport in France is not marginal. It is a reality. Currently, we have around 3 million people in France that have access to free public transport network. Since the 20s, there is just a little mistake. It's 46 networks across France that have adopted full fare-free access, and it is still growing currently. We have different models. So total free access with no conditions. For example, in Dunkirk, if you come from London, from the USA, even from another cities in France, you just have to jump in the bus, sorry. And we have also partial access based on time. For example, we have cities where it is free only the weekend. We have also based on user profile, like if you are young, if you are old, it is based also on the incomes. And it can be also a link to service type, some shuttles in specific cities that are free. And something that we need also to highlight is that some conditions are for people living in the city. For example, Montpellier, one of the biggest cities in Europe to have free public transport for more than 500,000 people. So Montpellier in the south of France is only for the residents. So if I come from Grenoble myself to Montpellier, I need to pay my ticket, but for all the people living in Montpellier and in the metropolitan area, it is free. Next slide, please. I want to highlight something. This policy is kind of a cross-party policy, and I really want to speak about the political part because it means a lot. One key point at the end, this is not a partisan idea. Since 1971, 46 cities have implemented full fare free transit, 18 right-wing majorities, 21 with left-wing majorities, and 7 with centrist coalition. I just want to highlight something is that on the 21 left-wing majorities, it represents a lot of more people than for the 18 right-wing majorities. For the 18 right-wing majorities, it's most of them are small cities, but for the 21 by left-wing majorities, it's bigger cities. So more people have access to free public transport. In the last local election in 2020, more than 100 pro-free transport lists ran in French local election, and 18 of them won. And for example, Montpellier won one of them. So this is not just a mobility solution, it is a popular democratic demand. And next year, in March 2026, we will have the local election in France, and this topic is already in the middle of every list. So it will be an interesting thing to see next year. Next slide, please. So one thing that we hear a lot is that who is paying? How is it working in France and so on? So there is no such thing as a free lunch, but let's look at the numbers in France. In 2015, commercial revenues covered less than 14% of public transport costs, only 21% in large cities, and just 10% in smaller towns. What we see here is that the bulk of funding already comes from public sources, mainly the mobility tax and local government contribution. I want to highlight the mobility tax. It's really specific to France. It is a transport tax paid by companies in France to help fund public transportation in cities. Employers with more than 10 employees must pay it, and the money goes to the local transport authorities to support buses, trains, and other public transport services. And this is a percentage, so this mobility tax is a percentage of the gross payroll. So at the end, the real question is not can we afford it in France, but rather do we choose to make public transport a universal right? Because at the end, introduction of free public transport is really a political choice. Next slide, please. Let's speak about a real case. Let's look at Dunkirk, one of France's most advanced free transit cities. In 2018, they launched a bus rapid transit network. It cost 65 million euros with free service costing just 4 million per year. Since then, the ridership has increased by 125%, which is huge. We also saw a public transport model share that was at 5% in 2015, and now it's up 8 points, so 13%. There is no need for cars or validation, just open access. The network is now expanding to serve tourist areas, to reach factories with no parking, and to support shift workers with better schedules. Next slide, please. So we saw lots of social effects and changes in mobility behaviors. Since 2018, 72%. Oh, sorry, it's my wrong side. So we saw one first topic was the elimination of the issue of non-uptake of solidarity-based pricing. This is a real issue. Having solidarity-based pricing is an issue. More than 30% of people in France doesn't know that they have access to a solidarity-based pricing. There is also another issue regarding this topic because there is complex eligibility rules, you have administrative burden, psychological barriers, and it often limited uptake by those who need it the most. So we are not in favor of solidarity-based pricing. Increase social diversity on board. Of course, it improves service in disadvantaged neighborhoods, and it is changing perceptions of public transport among affluent populations, people with more money, people with families, and so on. It's also improved purchasing power amid successive crises. And we had an unexpected emergence of conviviality on board the network. I saw some questions and comments regarding antisocial behavior, incivilities, and so on. Every city in France that had some study on it saw the incivilities going down and not up. When people have a free public transport, they want to take care of it and not to break it or whatever. Next slide, please. So 72%, this is the number of car users who also take the bus. They say they now use public transport more often. So it is really an important number that has been got during a survey in Dunkirk 5 years after public transport has been implemented. So why? First of all, higher fuel prices, so free access removes the major cost barrier. It is up to 100 euros per month per household, and the network is now denser and more reliable. The biggest shift, trips to work and shopping, and new public transport users include employed residents with families, not just people in need. And this is really an important thing for us. I want to conclude quickly. I have no other slide, but I have some time as I see my clock. Free public transport is not just a mobility tool. It is a tool for social justice, ecological transition, and public health. It simplifies access, reduces inequalities, and reinforces public services. In contrast, as I said before, salary-based pricing still comes with complex eligibility rules, psychological barriers. So free public transport removes all that. It is universal, unconditional, and empowering. And that's why we believe it's time to stop asking who deserves a lower fare and start asking why not give it to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jerome. And thanks for getting us back on track on time. That was really interesting. It's always interesting to hear from examples from outside of the UK. I'd like now to introduce our final speaker, Beat Mueller, who's a senior consultant with UITP, who has some other views to talk to us about. Beat, please share your views with us. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe the host can put my video. Yeah, thank you, because that's centrally done.
I think you're in control of your video, Beat.
Yeah, okay. Sorry for that. Yeah, more for an accent, actually. Now a German accent. Also, I'm Swiss, actually, and born in Zurich, but I hope it's not too bad. I work as a consultant for a small consultancy called Transmission, based in Paris, actually, and working mainly in France and other countries, and more, hopefully, in the UK. But today, next slide, please, I will actually talk more about the work I do with UITP. UITP, as you might know, is the Trade Association of Public Transport, grouping together almost everybody in public transport, all the main operators, most transport authorities, and lots of industry representatives. 1,900, not persons, but member organizations, actually, and companies and authorities grouped together for over 140 years or something, and holding in itself, organizing itself by having 27 thematic committees, and one actually on transport and finance that I'm part of and that I was chairing over the last years, and that has been charged by UITP with the growing debate about free, fair public transport to work on the subject and actually propose an official position for UITP on the subject, and we have been doing that, and I will quickly talk what is in this position paper. Next, please. So the first position paper, which is a bit less than 5 years old, and still obviously available on the UITP website for free. This position paper actually has been worked out looking at the main cities and areas that have or are planning to put full free fare public transport. So we have been looking at some French cities, cities that have opted for free fare, and others like Lyon that have been successful, quite successful without free fares. And we have consulted and audited representatives from all these cities and really looked into the figures and surveys and studies done on these cities in order to come up with some conclusions and recommendations. Next, please, that I quickly present. I can't go obviously in the detail of all these cases, but you've heard some from Jerome. Yeah, what we came out with is quite a clear position, really supported by the members and the policy board of UITP, that there are more effective ways in supporting public transport, in investing in public transport than through free fares. And why is that the case? That is because people actually look first about the service offer, about the extension of the coverage of the service geographically, timetable-wise, early hours, late hours, the weekend, the frequency of the service during the day, and its quality, punctuality, travel information, the state of the buses and vehicles. All this is much more important for potential users and current users to use more public transport than the fares. Why? Because most places actually have quite low fares, and especially low fares if you compare to car use. So it's not a problem, public transport. The main barrier is not fares. The main barrier is the service extension and the quality of the service. And therefore, if you want to improve public transport, the best way is to invest first and mainly the money into the service offering rather than into the fares. Obviously, we acknowledge as well in the industry association that there is a barrier for some people to use public transport with low incomes, mainly people with low incomes. So there is a need for making public transport accessible for these groups, and we clearly support social fares or concessionary fares, as you call them in the UK. No problem with that. And actually, the second paper is concentrated on these. But again, we say fully free fare is very expensive policy with very little success. Actually, we see that there is a increased ridership, as Jerome told, but most of this increased ridership is actually current users using more frequently the public transport for trips that they have been doing walking or sometimes cycling, rather than actually new users of the service. So there's very few conversion of car users, especially of new users of public transport. There is increased usage by current users and some non-users that have been walking or cycling, which is a little bit besides the main point we want to achieve in our public transport network. So the better use of the money is to invest in service quality and service offering, and maybe limit to the low or free fare events to targeted, more marketing-oriented things, as has been shown before by Phil, notably for summer periods or other things, in order to attract people to public transport, but not make it free for everybody. Next, please. Having said that it should not be free, obviously the next question is how high should the fares be set, and how to set the fares. And therefore, we have worked on a second policy brief that actually came out a few months ago and has been presented at the UITP summit in Hamburg in June, which is called Keeping It Fair, and is about fare affordability, obviously as well, to be downloaded at the UITP website. And this one is more looking into how fares should be set, how high fares should be set, and especially about social and concessionary fares. Again, I can't summarize everything in this policy brief, but I'll have to concentrate on the recommendation. Next, please, that we came out with. First recommendation is actually a reminder to say that if you want to have a public transport that is really fulfilling its purpose of being a public service, it needs some public money supporting it. So fares shouldn't be set as high as to cover everything. And that has been a really general message accepted by all UITP members, even in Asia and Latin America and the US. There should be a public contribution in order to allow for a better coverage geographically, timetable-wise, and also lower fares, and especially the social and concessionary fares. The fares from the users, as been said before, should be there, but should be set on a level that they stay competitive, of course, especially to car use, which is not a problem in most cases, but there might be cases where fares are set high and there might be a comparative problem of competitiveness presented to car use, especially of marginal cost of car use. Once the fares are set on a right low level allowed by the public contribution to the service, there is, of course, still the problem of affordability for certain groups of people. And there, clearly we say there should be concessionary fares, there should be social fares. Next, please. But these concessionary fares, they should be done in a targeted and in a limited way. It's obviously dangerous if you make it free or almost free for too large groups, because then you end up with a network where the contribution of fares is very low, like in most smaller cities in France, and that's actually the origin of the movement for free fares in France. They have fares that are already so low that they contribute very little to the total budget, and therefore you can ask yourself, why not make them totally free? Because they are already as low as to contribute in most cases below 10% to total costs. So be careful with social fares and concessionary fares. It shouldn't be spread too large, but should be as targeted as possible. Different ways of organizing that. We give some examples in the paper, but careful not to make it free for all youngs up to 30, as we see in some cases, and some elderly people as of 60, because then you have like more than half of your potential users not paying, and that's probably not ideal, especially will not give you the budget to have a correct and good service. And then once we have set the fares, we also talk about adapting them annually, because that's a big question always. You don't want to have the whole political debate about fare levels and the right level, the right setting of fares. So we really push as an industry organization for the adoption of a fare formula, which allows to easily adapt over the years, at least for inflation and sometimes other factors, the fares, and keep actually the contribution in percentage of the total cost of fares, rather than have this fare erosion that we have seen in so many places over the last years. And the final point said again in the first paper is, of course, to look at service quality. Well, that was it for my part, and I hope to have been as short as requested.
Thank you very much, Bea. There's some really interesting presentations there, and as always, I feel like we could have spent much longer with each of you, but if I can ask you all now to come back onto screen, and we've got 25 minutes or so to pick up on some of the questions that have been posted in the Q&A, or that were shared previously. And I think it's probably fair to say that from all of the presentations, there's a clear understanding that, you know, that public transport has to be affordable to be attractive, but there are clearly different ways of tackling this. And coming right back to you know, Brian's presentation to start with, the ability to make public transport attractive is potentially impacted by national policy, and, you know, national ways of doing things. And I think, you know, we in the UK quite often look to Europe with quite envious eyes on some of the administrative ability there to better control public transport funding. So just picking up on some of the questions that have come in, and trying to cover stuff that perhaps hasn't been covered specifically in any of the presentations. Some of the questions that have come in have talked about the impact of free public transport, and potentially that could be free or very low priced public transport. What evidence has any of the participants seen where free public transport has actually clearly made a difference to traffic volumes, and therefore made, you know, town centres and city centres, you know, more pleasant places to actually be? And what are then the role and impacts of that? I'd like to start with you, Jerome, potentially. You must have some evidence of this from France.
Yeah, totally. As I said during my presentation, we have to understand that free public transport can't work without a nice and big public transport network. We have certain areas in France where there are no buses, no train station, and so on. And if you come and you say we will make it free, they will love to you. So there are some evidence in many cities. Dunkerque is one of them, because the ridership was up to 125% in the bus, and it worked because of many reasons. The first one is that they reworked all the network of public transport with new high-level services buses, and it means a doubled frequency. They redesigned all the network, and they invested also in modern buses. I answered one question, I think, earlier to in the Q&A. Maybe I can say my answer again. But it was because the fare-free buses were combined with better service that led to a broader use base, including car owners and working professionals. And when you have the free access, it really removes the stigma and positions the bus as a service for everyone. We also have numbers in Montpellier, which is really a big city with 500,000 people. There is an increase of ridership of 20% currently, but for a city like Montpellier, it's a lot. And we are starting to see that in the first year after free public transport were for everyone, we are starting to see a model report of people from cars to the tramways and buses. Of course, as Beat said, Beat, sorry for the pronunciation of your name, you said earlier, yeah, some people with bikes, walking, are taking the bus and so on, instead of keeping the same preferred transport. But at the end, the free public transport doesn't come without a package for biking ways, a bus lane, frequent service, and so on. We really want to focus that on the high level. You don't have only free public transport. You need the good network. You need biking lines. You need the walking ways for people that likes to walk. You need bus lines so people can take the bus and so on. It's a whole package that makes it work. Thank you.
Thanks. And so if you believe that that it can reduce car volumes, Bea, the research that you've done, has that also borne out the fact that you mentioned that people have switched, and I know, Emma, you said that, you know, in the research that you've done, it was a lot of the city journeys were replacing walking or cycling potentially. Bea, have you, the research that you've done, have you seen any drop in car volumes within town centres?
There's a problem of measurement, especially as in places that have gone for free fares, like Dunkirk is a very good example in the north of France. They have at the same time invested a lot in the improvement of the offer and the vehicles and the quality. So it's almost impossible to perfectly isolate what comes from better service and what comes from the fares. But overall, we really see a very low effect of all these schemes in attracting car users and converting car users. And especially what we say is not that there is zero effect, but that money that you lose by doing that, by going to free fares, which is quite a lot in most of the places, could be much better invested. And actually, there was a report just published yesterday by the French Court of Accounts, or the Financial Court, saying it's a waste of money from a government efficiency perspective to go for free fares, rather to use money to other measures, like having a much better frequency of the service to attract people. And that's what we argue for. It's not so much that in an ideal dream world, we won't like to have free buses as well. But what we say is, in all the places today, we have constrained budgets. And when you have a constrained budget, you want to invest most efficiently the money. And the most efficient way is to first and furthermore expand the service, expand the frequency, improve the quality, and not touch the fares, which are in most places already quite low, actually.
Okay, thank you. That's generated lots of discussion, I'm sure. So, Phil, can I turn to you first?
Yeah, no worries. I just wanted to come in. I think there's a good point there about the balance between fares offers and improved services. It's a real challenge that we've experienced in the west of England, which is, if nobody knows that area well, it's basically one big city, one smaller city, and lots of rural areas. And the cities want cheap offers, free offers. You know, we're continually being pushed for free fares offers for those living and working in the city. The rural areas want better services because they've lost a lot of bus services over the years, and they want to see those services improved. And fares officers are not, you know, they say, what's the point of a fare offer if you can't get a bus? So, you know, it's that tension is live, and it's something that we continually are having to deal with, and it's really difficult. It's a really difficult one. There's no easy answer, because clearly you can't not focus on actually in growth. You know, the simple commercial economics of it is, the more people you can get on the buses, the cheaper the buses can become. And the way you get more people on the buses is by focusing on the urban areas where people live and work. And so it's a real tension.
Yeah, I think we explored some of that in one of our previous webinars about rural transport. It is a real tension. You're right, Phil. Emma, can I bring you in here? Oh, you're on mute, Emma.
That happened once, didn't it? Thank you. I think just to kind of echo thoughts, that it needs to be a whole systems approach. A lot of the time, the evidence that we see from our research is that fares is only kind of one piece of the puzzle to get people onto public transport, and things like frequency and reliability, and actually having services kind of local where you want to go, where you want to go from, are kind of the more key drivers for people. And I think I've said in the chat, it might be that those are actual barriers, so that there isn't a bus service down the road from me, or it doesn't go at the times that I need, or it's always late, or they might be kind of incorrect perceptions that people have had through things that they've heard from others, things they've seen in the news. So it's really about trying to address perceptions as well as actually to deliver infrastructure improvements that will be key to behaviour change. That's all I wanted to say. I think Jerome's got his hand up, but Cathryn, I'll hand back to you.
Yeah, just to answer quickly on all those things that has been discussed. So first of all, one topic regarding model report, I agree with a bit. It's not something easy to analyze and easy to have data on, but what we can say currently is that when you have, let me just check my notes because it's, model shift from cars to public transport, I think is one of the most debated and under-researched, sadly, aspects of free public transport. But we do have some solid findings, especially from Dunkerque, for example, but from other cities like Tallinn, that we can use here to build strong evidence-based argument, because the model shift is real. It does happen, but it really depends on service quality, network coverage, and new platform. Free fares alone are not enough, and we are agreeing on this also. They must be combined with better frequency, priority infrastructure, and communication. So we also have to understand that for a model report, I answered someone in the chat before. When you have a car and you start to take the bus, of course you still have your car. You are not selling it the day after. So what we see is that people rarely ditch their car overnight, but model shift is gradual. First, it's more occasional use, and then fewer car trips per week. And so this is also something that it's of course hard to measure and stuff like that, but this is something real that where we have really evidence on this. And one other topic that I really want to highlight too is regarding the court reports that you talked about. The court reports provide useful financial frameworks, but it remains really incomplete in 3 areas: measuring and monetizing positive externalities, health, climate, safety, congestion, road infrastructure. It costs a lot. Only in France, if you want to have some numbers, in France, air pollution is 100 billion euros per year, 550 billion euros per year for road car crash and stuff like that. All the congestion is around 20 billion per year. So when you have those numbers, this is not the issue of paying for free public transport. And so there is this first point. Then you have the net social benefits of universal access, reducing non-take-up, dignity, cohesion, access to jobs, healthcare, and the financing and governance architecture needed to make well-designed free transit sustainable alongside the supply shock and car use policies. A broader evaluation can, in certain contexts, small and medium networks or large networks with strong car regulation and dedicated funding. It leads to more favorable conclusion on free transit or inclusive hybrid models. The key is not free fares alone versus fares alone, but the coherence of a policy package and the robustness of intertemporal evaluations. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. And so, Brian, I'd like to bring you in here, back to the kind of review you did of the forthcoming bus bill. Are we really missing a trick then in the UK here with, you know, the policies that are being introduced in terms of actually making a difference to both bus use but public transport altogether?
I really don't envy transport planners, actually, or indeed local transport authorities at this point. As I say, the choice about be given of regulatory tools is overwhelming. It's hard to know which ones to pick. It's hard to try and pick best practices from, you know, even this country, let alone countries abroad. My discussion at the beginning about there being a political consensus, there is a question about what the real politic is, and questions have been asked in the Q&A about, well, if that is how the parties all agree, then where is the money, for example? And that is obviously a question which looms large over what is actually possible to do with these tools. I would say that the focus solely on bus services from essentially the aspect of the bus in regulatory terms is not as holistic or as joined up as other people in the comments section have mentioned. I mentioned most obviously that the bus and a bus service is a bus and a road. Nothing is said about road traffic management priorities for bus in the strategy much. Moreover, the bus is also part of an overall transport system, and the comment has been made in the Q&A also about bus, focusing on bus solely as its own mode is not necessarily that helpful either. From a local transport authority's point of view, your combined local transport network is your bus and everything else that you can join to it, including active travel and walking. Your incentives have to be all aligned and pulling in the right direction. Local authorities probably do need more obvious policies on cars, frankly. Mixed messaging abounds in that world. And in terms of roads and bus priorities, many local authorities would prefer to keep quiet in those rather than sticking their head above the parapet and having a particular lobby or other come at them. So the Bus Services Act, it is transformational. It provides a lot of tools, but a lot of the real politics still exists. The money, the political battles that you'll have to win, the infrastructure, and local authorities are going to have to bring something. This is not just about whipping operators, whether they're publicly owned or privately owned, to give you more and more and more. Everybody has to do their part because it's a combined system, combined network.
Thank you. I think some of the work that we've done with authorities recently, they do that, for all of the political will to really improve bus and multimodal travel, they're not necessarily then in control of all of those aspects. So they might not be in control of the road network on which they're trying to plan an improved bus network. Phil, I wanted to just turn to you if I could. The west of England has been it's really pushing hard to in lots of ways to improve public transport offering across the region. Have you been able to combine any of the kind of bus incentives with any disincentives for car use at all, knowing particularly how popular your area is for tourists that are coming into the area?
Yeah, I mean, we know that demand management, as Brian was saying, is an integral part of what we need to do to try to influence behaviour. And obviously, in the west of England, two of the key initiatives we had the Clean Air Zone in Bath, which was really focused on larger vehicles rather than the car. But Bristol is focused on the car. We have seen an impact in that. We certainly pre-COVID, we were an outlying region insofar as we were seeing growth in bus patronage. And that was interrupted during COVID, but we have returned back to that trajectory where we are seeing growth in bus patronage. But we historically have come from a lower base than most of the other major urban areas in the UK. And I think pre-COVID, we just reached the bottom. I think it might have been Sheffield, South Yorkshire. We just touched the bottom of where they were on a downward trajectory. I've not looked at the latest data for it, but I know that we are back on an upward trajectory again. But we definitely have, it's something, I'm not actually from Bristol myself originally, and I've seen the impact of embedded car use here. There's definitely that feeling that car usage is higher than the average here, and there are certain parts of our region where it is completely embedded. So you definitely need to have those demand management tools in place. Otherwise, you can put fares offers in place, and you can put more bus services on. But if people aren't going to then actually take advantage of them, then that's something that we need to influence through other methods.
Yeah, thank you. Just looking at some of the other questions that have come in, there's been a number of questions that have centered around you know, the kind of the ability to pay and that as opposed to the free or very low offer. You know, if people are able to pay higher fares and that therefore brings in more income into the public network, then can be invested in better services. Should they then be offered free fare? You know, there's been comments made in the Q&A about, you know, the fact that people value things they pay for more. I know there was a comment, I can't remember now whether it was Jerome or that made it, that, you know, that people value their free network or their very low fare network, but actually, you know, in a world where, you know, the people that have more money generally, you know, through taxation pay more to make sure that the world is a fairer place, is giving free or low fares to everybody really the right answer? Jerome, I'll start with you if that's okay.
Yeah, you can start. Yeah, this is the right answer. Currently, I'm doing well. I'm an engineer, so I have a well life, and I'm not people with low incomes, and we don't need to think about who will take the bus, even if they are rich or not. What we want is the most people to take buses, tram, train, and so on, because we need to comply with lots of ecological stuff regarding the agreements we had on the COP21, for example. And so we really understand that when you have free public transport, there is no, oh, this one have access to free public transport, but not me. This one have access to free public transport, but not me. And something also in France, when you have the mobility tax paid by the companies, as I said, the mobility tax is on the gross payroll, meaning if the company is paying you a lot, you will participate more to the public transport. So it means that if you are richer, you will contribute more to the free public transport network. So at the end, you have the right to take the free public transport network even if you are rich, and you also contribute more. So it's based on equality at the end. This mobility tax is also based on equality.
Emma, have you found from any of your research that there is that any of the findings that you've had have kind of supported that idea that it shouldn't matter how, you know, whether you can afford it or not, that equality is a better option?
Yeah, I think so. I didn't talk about it today, but we recently delivered some focus groups for Transport for Wales, looking at their concessionary fare scheme for elderly people. And we also spoke to young people regarding discounted fares. And this was all before they announced the £1 fare for young people in Wales. And I think the kind of consensus was that regardless of background, you know, people appreciate having a free option or a reduced option for them, and it would be difficult to, I think, implement and to police something that was maybe a bit more means tested. Would certainly introduce more resource for you know, the likes of Transport for Wales to manage. So I think, yeah, starting from an equality position provides benefits for everybody, including those who are managing and delivering the schemes.
Thank you. There was a comment in one of the questions that was actually posted in before the webinar started, that, you know, more people on public transport is not a, you know, it's not a right for those people who can't afford anything else. It's a right for us all, because it, you know, it provides, as Jerome was saying, for you know, for improved environmental outcomes as well. Phil, just turning back to you, I know you're very early in your research from your summer offer, but did you do any did you have any findings on who was using that offer? Was it, I know you mentioned people said that they were able to afford to do things they couldn't have done before, but did you get any kind of demographics on the people that were using it?
We still haven't got all of the data yet, so unfortunately I can't dive into that in much detail. We've got the anecdotal evidence that we're building, and so I think that, like I said in my presentation, the evidence is we've got parts of the region where people just don't travel outside of that region. So we've started to get emerging evidence that we are seeing that happening. There's two particularly deprived wards in Bristol, which are Harcliffe in the south of the city and Lawrence Hill in the east of the city, both very, very high or low, depending on which way you're looking at on the deprivation index. And we've got evidence, and we're working with people within those parts of the city to look at how we can encourage them to travel by bus more. And this has been a key part of this research. So once we've got that data, we will look at sharing that more widely. But I think that will be something that I think will feed into future initiatives. I know it's something that our mayor is keen to look at the data and investigate what options there are for us to do something differently. So we are looking at whether we do this, whether we do it in a different way, whether we try something different. So I guess watch this space.
Thank you. I'm afraid we are looking like we are running out of time. I'd love to have perhaps spoken a little bit. Bear, have you got any last comments just before we go?
Yeah. Thank you. Just one point to add, maybe on fares and the simplicity and the barrier. I think that is important to be said, that obviously even if we keep fares and in most places, even Montpellier and Tallinn, they have kept actually a fare ticket, even if the ticket was free at the end, just to measure and to follow a little bit the people. But I think important is to have a simple system and an integrated system if you have fares, and to make this attractive. And their technology, and that has been said well by your colleague, technology will help us, because you now have these tap in, tap out systems, even moving into be in, be out systems, where the application knows automatically if you're in a public transport bus or train or not, and allows you to charge automatically, even without thinking about that you have to tap out or tap in. And I think these will help to reduce that barrier, and it's important not to have a too complicated system. And I agree with Jerome that sometimes there's a lot of social fares, but people don't even know that they exist and are not taking them up, and that's probably a waste of money as well. But coming back to the free fares, I think in an ideal world we would have free fares, but we are in a world where government budgets are very constrained, and there's a lot of other causes, hospitals, defense, police, that are also requesting more money. So we have to be really careful of not actually putting in danger the expansion and improvement of public transport by asking for something which will be very costly and which will lead to a lack of money for other things, like improving the service, which dearly needs it in most places.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. It's been we could have talked about these all of these discussions and more from the Q&A for a long while more, I think. So as Juliana said, we'll definitely come back to this topic, I'm sure. It seems it always comes out to the fact that a really good service, delivered simply, is the way forward for encouraging more people to use it. Just working out how we can do that, and as Brian alluded to in his presentation, we've got tools, but how do we use them? So let's see how we go on with the local authorities implementing some of those tools in the future. Thank you very much to all the participants. Thanks to our sponsors, and hopefully we'll see you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.